everyone. Welcome to API Systems Inc. webinar about what you missed at BriForum. For those that do not know, BriForum is an independent technical conference held by TechTarget and the founder of BriForum, Brian Madden. I myself have been a fan of Brian Madden and the work he's done in the terminal services space for over a decade. Brian's put together a wealth of knowledge and also a technical community and following that rivals many of the very popular communities out there, such as VMware user groups and some of your more niche application user groups. Brian has really made this space fun and exciting for everyone, and he exemplifies that at his yearly conferences. We put this together simply to talk about some of the things that we saw at BriForum, what we liked, the interaction we had with fellow peers, partners, and we thought we'd share that information with you. The intent of this webinar series is to be more interactive and be part of the community and share the information that we learned with the community. So some of the things you will not hear is heavy sales pitching, opinions based on our likes and dislikes of products, but simply the facts to open up a more collaborative discussion about this exciting space we're in with both end-user computing and the ever-changing application landscape that's out there within cloud. For our agenda today, we're going to quickly go over some introductions, talk about some of the general conference observations and the events, some of the technologies that were showcased, and lastly, and my favorite, we're going to talk about some of the tips and tricks that the attendees picked up whilst on their journey at BriForum. So hello everyone, my name is Mark Knouse. I'm the CTO at API Systems Inc. Usually I joke and say it stands for Chief Toy Officer, meaning I get to play with the latest and greatest technology and watch my team as they struggle with making it work. I'm joking. They really don't struggle. They often get it to work very quickly. You can find me on Twitter at ShaneTech. I tweet mostly about technology-related items with an occasional car or art or music reference. So to my left, which you can't see, is Adam Platt. Adam is part of Octo. And Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Adam Platt. I'm a software engineer here at API Systems. I do a lot of the making things work that Mark was mentioning. It's a lot of fun coming from a software engineering background into the world of IT and virtualization. It's been a really, really interesting experience for me, and I learn more every day, and I grow more every chance I get to talk to some of our peers. You can find me on Twitter at Platt. I tend to tweet mostly about PowerShell, a little bit about Citrix, VMware, virtualization, those sorts of things. I don't tend to digress from that very much, I guess, do I? I've been nothing but PowerShell lately.
Yeah. Cool. And to my right, we have Kyle Hedden. Kyle is an honorary member of our Office of the CTO. He often comes in on special projects. But Kyle's main focus is our managed services business, and he does a great job providing engineering and operational support to our many Fortune 100 customers. So Kyle, why don't you briefly introduce yourself?
Hey guys, how you doing? This is Kyle Hedden. Working with API Technologies now. I have just under 10 years of experience in the industry, working with everything from desktops to network appliances, virtualization solutions, and storage. So over here at API, like Mark mentioned, touching everything from the endpoint down to the storage subsystem, getting it to work and providing support once it's in production.
Awesome. Wow, so you guys traveled out to Denver. I'm sure Denver's a beautiful place. I was only there very briefly. But, I mean, you guys came back, you had some general observations. Big focus on graphics. And Adam, you said how impressed you were that there was just so much more talk of code. And then lastly, we had the first Docker appearance at a BriForum conference. It's really cool. So Kyle, I know you talked a lot about the graphics and how impressed you were. had some side conversations about how 10 years ago, just doing PowerPoint over remote display protocol was a challenge. Can you speak on some of the things you saw?
Oh, absolutely. And the focus on graphics was something that I was really excited to see, because one of my biggest personal hobbies is gaming. And I've been a huge NVIDIA fan since the beginning, going on 10, 15 years at this point. So I was really happy to see a lot of the graphical comparisons between the different hypervisors, the different vendors that are out there, and the different methods in which you can accelerate your 2D and your 3D displays to your end users and improve their user experience. So we'll talk more on that in the tips and tricks section.
Cool. So Adam, something probably near and dear to your heart, and I know when you attended your first BriForum conference, you said to me, why am I going? There's a bunch of infrastructure, and more importantly, Citrix folks that are there. So what did you find?
Well, I mean, last year, my first BriForum, I was wondering, really, am I going to get a lot out of this, given my background? And, at that time, I felt like my knowledge of virtualization was a lot more limited. But I learned a ton at last year's BriForum. I learned so much about, even down to the protocols. I think Sean Bass had a talk about exploring the ICA protocol and how it consumes bandwidth and different comparisons on that. And as much as I felt like my knowledge was limited, I still followed it. I still understood it. This year I feel like I've learned a ton. Since between last year and between all the projects that we've worked on here at API, I was a lot more confident that I'd be able to get value out of these sessions. At the same time, I was finding that code is growing. I'm seeing a lot more going on that involves code at BriForum and in IT in general. And we're also going to go over that in a little more detail in the next couple of slides, I think.
Awesome. Yeah, and then for me to hear that there was even a session on Docker was really exciting, because we've been seeing a lot of interest in that technology and how it changes the way organizations can get their applications out and more follow that DevOps model than the traditional siloed approach with operations and development. Awesome. So.
Yeah, so I think first thing we're going to get a little more into this increasing presence of code in IT. This year's BriForum, there were a number of PowerShell or just coding in general related talks. A couple that I took note of. There was one, how to make PowerShell sit up and beg, and that one was actually in BriForum London and Denver. That same talk given in both. Another one about RDS deployment and scaling using some automation there. And I think my favorite out of these three, a talk given by Jason Conger, mobile platform smackdown. So discussing the different options that you have available for taking your enterprise applications and deploying them to your mobile users. And that's a big, big challenge, especially with bring your own device, BYOD becoming so big these days. He covered a lot of very deep technical stuff that I think is just very, very advanced coding skills required for some of those topics that he touched on. But he gave a nice overview of, these are the tools that are available. This is the level of skill that you need to bring if you're going to use this tool versus that tool. So even for people who aren't experienced with code, it's going to give you a good overview and an idea of what you'll be able to do for your users.
So would you say that now as IT evolves and we grow up and mature and change, and more importantly how cloud and automation has changed the way we go about operations, that it's no longer an option for IT professional or specifically an infrastructure administrator to, like we used to say, know enough to be dangerous?
I think, I'm not sure if we're quite at the point where it's no longer an option, but I think we're fast reaching that point.
I would agree too, and coming from my side, and I'm ancient here in the room, used to have to know a little bit of batch scripting, some light VB, but you can pretty much get by with snippets of code from the internet. Where we're seeing this go, though, with our team, too, is each member has to have the ability to at least understand the language some way. It's for us no longer that nice to have.
Or at least know enough about it to know when it's appropriate to invest the time and the effort to develop something versus just get the job done. So,
yeah, Kyle, that's got to be very interesting for you, because coming from your world and now how we're very code first. So you now have that at your disposal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's very important because nowadays scripting isn't only for building a process that's going to sit and run in the background. We've had cases where, let's say we had a whole catalog full of virtual machines that we needed to increase the hard drive space on. This may not be a reusable script, but if you know PowerShell, you can get in there and increase the hard drive space on as many VMs as you want in a single line of code.
Wow.
It's a one-off, but it still saves you hours of time.
Right. So obviously none of us in the room are math majors, and 6 and 2 is 8, not 7. So my apology for that.
No, that's because of the talk that was given in bold.
Oh,
that's
okay.
why I included that.
Very good. So thank you. Cool. What do we have up next? Infrastructure as code.
This is one of my favorite topics. Infrastructure as code is actually a huge part of what I gave my talk on at BriForum this year. I was fortunate enough to be able to give a talk this year, which I was very grateful for. It was only my second year even being there. But I was really excited to be there and share some of my software engineering knowledge with everyone, kind of in return for everything that I've learned from them. So infrastructure as code is this concept of taking our existing infrastructure and our existing hardware tools and the baseline software that supports it. A lot of that stuff is already programmable. They have APIs. We have things like the lights out interfaces that you can connect to remotely. Those have APIs. So we already have a server room full of tools that we can control remotely, one by one. Infrastructure as code is beginning to connect all of those devices together, where you'll now go to, you could go to your lights out layer and mount a virtual, what is it?
It's a media,
yes.
Virtual media.
Sorry, escaping me. Yeah. So you can mount a virtual disk to install the hypervisor from scratch without even setting foot in your server, without even really looking at anything. And on top of that, you can then connect to that hypervisor once it's installed. You can provision virtual machines. You can connect them to your brokering layer, and you can register those virtual machines and set them up with your users. You can do this all through code, and by unifying those disparate systems, you can create a solution that does it all together in a seamless workflow. And it's definitely something that's becoming a lot more popular these days, and a big part of it is to do with the DevOps movement. And the tool that I covered in my talk was PowerShell Desired State Configuration. But there are some other popular tools out there, I think most notably Chef and Puppet. They're both big players in this space. And they're all very useful in their own ways.
Yeah, Adam, you make a great point that you use the lights out interface, or more importantly, just a remote access board on any of your servers that you can use to programmatically hit and perform actions. I'm going to tell you something. That's nothing new. We've had that around since the first Riblo boards. However, we just didn't trust a lot of this stuff, and more importantly, we never had someone like yourself on a team to really dive in and understand all the ins and outs, and that's probably why we didn't trust it. I think as we evolve here, especially for our teams as well, who support infrastructure, we've decoded that mystery, and now, obviously, once you understand something, you can trust it. So, great points. Kyle, you have anything to add to that?
I leverage Adam's expertise almost every day. If I'm trying to automate something quick and simple, or if we identify something that's chronic in the environment and we need to develop some sort of health checking or something like that, I need to be the guy that tells Adam what we need, and Adam helps me get there. So we really have a great synergy between the two teams.
Yeah, and me and you kind of grew up the same way, same style of engineer, very troubleshooting heavy first.
Yeah.
But in the past, I would just go do it myself and probably stay up all night and get all teary-eyed and make a lot of manual mistakes. And I don't think we do that anymore. It's not an option to do that.
No, I was guilty of that at one point. Become a little more self-conscious of that, and having resources like Adam at my disposal, which is something that's fantastic, makes our life a lot easier.
Yeah, so I think an overwhelming point and observation is these options of automation they're really becoming less of options and more standards.
I definitely agree with that.
Absolutely. Oh wow, the favorite part. So guys, I saw some of the tweets and the text, and I got to say I was incredibly jealous. So, Adam, why don't you speak on some of the events?
These were so much fun. So the first event we had was after the first night of the conference. This one-up arcade bar, amazing place. They had all these classic arcade games, and pretty much an open bar for us, hanging out, unlimited quarters. Kyle and I, we wound up playing the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Yep.
Struck up a conversation with a couple of guys, and it turns out, what was it? You guys used to.
Well, it turns out that these gentlemen were from a couple towns away in New Jersey, and through conversation came to find out they're actively on a project with one of my managers from a previous position. So talk about small world.
Yeah, great bonding time.
Yeah, great platform for like-minded individuals to get together, and it really promotes conversation. It makes it really easy to get to know your peers. So you're not out there, working hard the whole time. You're playing hard too.
Yeah, that's the part of BriForum I love the most. Is of course there may be decision makers at the forum, but you're really going to get some honest tech talk, and in a very inviting, not sales-driven environment. And I always find this conference to be a lot of fun. Man, and the Geek Out show. So what happened there?
So the Geek Out, they do the Geek Out every year, and there's a qualification that you have to take to get into it. Kyle and I didn't make it, but we had some good answers. We were able to kind of keep up with it, just not quite as much as some of the other geeks out there.
Well, ironically enough, I didn't think I was geeky enough to qualify, and then at the end of the show, it turns out none of the contestants knew the final answer, and I was able to spout off the colors off the top of my head. So don't count yourself out.
Yeah, the final answer, the final question was the color order for an RJ45 jack, right?
Yeah, I made enough patch panels and patch cables in a previous life that it's pretty much burned into my brain.
Yeah, so of interest, Claudio Rodriguez usually wins this show, and he's very animated and funny whilst up on the panel, but I think he's not allowed to take part in it. Anyway.
They mentioned that, actually.
Yeah. So, Drinks and Drones with Dell. Wow, that's a tongue twister. Where was that at?
I don't recall the venue, but it was like a Dave and Buster's kind of theme place. There was a bowling alley on the lower floor, and Dell Absence and NVIDIA actually they went all out. They rented out the entire top floor for us. They again had an open bar, providing us with quarters and games, and it was similar to One Up, but there were some different things there. We actually had a different crowd. I didn't see a lot of the same people at both of them. So it was, again, another opportunity to connect with some different faces.
I'm a conference veteran, and I've been to the smaller ones and the larger ones. And usually the parties, for the conference party, you bus to some place, you get some pretty decent food, maybe see a show. But at BriForum, every night is just that immersive experience with your peers, and just a lot of fun. So anybody on the call thinking about heading over to BriForum next year, do it. Don't think about it, just do it. So Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit? We're going to start our technology showcase, and the first one up is Docker and containers, more importantly.
Yeah, containers are a huge, huge and important topic, and I'm really happy to see that they are beginning to make an appearance at venues like BriForum. So the impetus of containers is that they are really rooted in the development world. They are heavily used by developers already because of the ability to maintain this isolated state where you can make your changes and move those changes around, deploying them to the QA environment and then into production, knowing that you're not going to be dealing with any of those, well, it worked on this server, but not on this server because this one thing is different. Containers isolate you from a lot of that. Now, the containers themselves have existed in Linux since 2008, when they were introduced as part of the kernel. Docker is a platform that uses that containerization technology to make those containers more portable and easier to connect to each other and easier to build and layer on top of each other.
So Adam, as a developer, did you ever find you were doing something to get around maybe the server guys, or from your side, would you just go off and build your own thing if you felt you weren't getting what you needed?
Personally, I don't believe I've ever done that. I think we used to joke about it a lot. You know, back when I used to work for software companies, we would make jokes all the time. And I think anytime there's a wall in between two departments, there's always jokes thrown back and forth.
But it flies over that wall.
Absolutely. Bug reports, bug fixes, everything flies over that wall. But you know, in my experience, I was lucky enough to work for companies where you know, our IT department was very accommodating, and we worked pretty well with them. But I won't say it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does in very, very many places. So the DevOps movement is really how I think containers and Docker are starting to come into this IT space. And what I would offer up as, you know, kind of my advice to anyone who's a little concerned about this or a little anxious about what it might mean, just remember that containers are still virtualization. It's a very important thing. So if you look at the way containers work as opposed to the way VMs work, again, we can see it's still virtualization, just done in a different way. And you're actually saving some overhead when you move to containers. So on the left-hand side here, where you're looking at how virtual machines work, your physical server has its host OS, and then in the hypervisor, your VMs run a full guest OS, and then on top of that, the applications dependent on the libraries that they need. In a container, your physical server or host OS, because at this point this could be a virtual server as well, it's just running one OS, where it shares its kernel space with what's going on inside the containers. So the containers don't have to duplicate an entire guest OS. They just have to provide the binaries and the libraries that the applications require, and they run in their own separate user spaces, sharing the kernel space of the host operating system. And you can see on the side the Docker engine is what helps you manage this all and move them back and forth. So it is still virtualization, slightly different way of looking at it, but I think it's going to be a really great move in the future. We're going to see a lot coming from this. One of the cool things that is on the horizon is that Microsoft has announced native container support for Windows Server 2016. On top of that, they're going to support all the Docker APIs. So you'll be able to use Docker to build and move containers around on Windows. So far, it's only been a Linux thing, but now it's going to be coming to Windows, which means more and more we're going to be able to virtualize and encapsulate and cart around our applications to wherever we need that capacity the most. And one of the really cool things that Microsoft is going to be doing is this concept of the Hyper-V container. So you can see in this diagram, there's two kind of types of containers that you can run. The first type, sort of in the center here, is just a regular container running on top of the Windows Server kernel. But Hyper-V containers provide the ability to add a very thin Hyper-V layer around, which provides further isolation to the containers that you're running on your servers. This is going to be great for the security concerns that there are with containers. And that's one of the things that, you know, as programmers, we don't think about that all the time. When we're just trying to get something to work, we just want it to work. And we think about the expected use cases. We don't always think about those negative cases until after we've gotten it to work, and then we think, okay, now we need to make it solid. Okay. So one of the concerns that many people have with Docker and containers is that there's some security hiccups here and there. You know, Docker themselves has been working on it, but now Microsoft is throwing their hat into the ring as well and offering this additional isolation.
Okay.
It's going to be very cool.
Wow. And VMware Project Enzo now. Who presented this at the conference?
They had a lunch and learn on this, and there were several speakers. I think Sean Bass might have been in that one, I believe, with a couple of his friends.
Harry, I think.
Yeah, Harry was definitely in there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so they were announcing this there. Pretty cool. It's a new single pane of glass cloud management platform, which is going to allow you to manage VMs however distributed they may be. If they're on your premises, multiple data centers that you may manage in the cloud, doesn't matter. You're going to be able to manage them, move them back and forth. It's going to make your job a lot easier. It really is comprised of three main components. The control pane, which you're going to see, which is really that single pane of glass. You have one interface to get in and manage everything. And that's going to offload tasks to that middle layer, which is the Enzo Smart Nodes, which is doing your just-in-time desktop and app provisioning. And that's really helping to expedite a lot of those cloning operations, provisioning tasks, things of that nature. But it does need to ride on top of Enzo-ready infrastructure. So you'll need to make sure that your infrastructure is ready and compatible with Enzo once it is released, because as you can see from the slide, it is still in early access. So if you do have any interest, be sure to go over to VMware and register so that you can give it a shot.
Sounds cool. So that control plane there, that's very interesting for us. And as admins, it's important that we can manage our infrastructure all from that pane of glass. And I've often criticized companies like VMware and Citrix for when they acquire a product, it's that yet another console.
Yeah, exactly. It can still, even though it's merged into that environment, it can still feel a little disjointed. You got to learn a new console, idiosyncrasies of that. So this I think is really going to help to just to aggregate everything and just make our lives easier, man. That's what we're after as engineers and administrators.
I like the service provider promise of this too. We'll have to investigate that further as we get early access.
Absolutely. Okay, so next up, this was admittedly one of my favorite products from the conference. If you don't know about ControlUp and you're working in a virtualized environment, you need to know about ControlUp. It's a very thin management platform. I believe the download is about 40 megs, and everything's going to run in memory. And this is going to be a console that's going to allow you to monitor and manage multiple layers of your VDI infrastructure. What it's going to do is actually it's going to push an agent that's going to run in memory, but it doesn't require an install. So you can keep this in your bag of tricks. If you're a consultant, you're on the SWAT team going in to check out issues. A lot of the guys that I talk to are using this. The first thing they do, they install ControlUp and get a good overview of the environment, because it's going to allow you to see how stressed things are. And let's go to the next slide real quick, actually, because you can see the interface, and it really shows you a good heat map of what's going on here. And they work off of something called stress level, which is like an aggregator based on predetermined thresholds to see, hey, are my nodes in trouble? So, if host CPU is going over, 70, 80%, maybe we turn orange. Hey, I want to see that. And you can actually filter and search through these interfaces so that you can take action against multiple nodes or objects simultaneously. There's pre-packaged tasks that are built in. There's script-based actions that you can apply. There's actually an entire community with ongoing development for new scripts and new tools, and you can get all that stuff for free. So check out ControlUp if you're not already using it.
Kyle, what environment would you really recommend that for? Do you see us using it on some of our VDI or Citrix platforms?
I think it really is going to be something great for VDI specifically. It's going to work with XenApp as well, but with VDI, I mean, you have many more entities out there in the environment, and trying to wrap all of their performance metrics up into a clean, presentable format has always been a challenge for me. Because if we're looking at VMs and guest metrics, you're not going to see the same true usage from the host side, and you're going to vCenter for some things, you're at the guest perf counters for some things, the broker's telling the other. And it's really hard to get a handle on. ControlUp wraps it all up, aggregates you, put it right in your face, and you can see what the problem is at a glance.
Yeah, that's a great point you just made. And I said this at my session last year, that all the counters and information, that information does reside somewhere. And yeah, as professionals in technology, administrators, specifically in virtualization, and for one, use Citrix as an example, all the data is there. And you can go get it manually. I think the challenge is that when you need this data the most, you're at a position where you don't have the time to go
collect it. Right. I've been in that challenge multiple times, and this could have saved me a lot of headaches. So.
Yeah, when you realize you need some type of monitoring tool, it's usually too late. So great. I hope we look into it a little bit more and look forward to hearing your reports on it.
Absolutely. Okay, so next up, another one of my favorites here, for different reasons, is ExtraHop. Now, this is something that I kind of had an idea was out there, but I've never seen this particular vendor. And they're doing agentless monitoring via wire data they're inspecting the network packets and they're taking a look at the metrics there. And you can raise alerts, emails, you get historical data out of it. It's fantastic. And the wire data doesn't lie. I mean, you can get agents and other things, and that might give you the data, but it might not be 100% true. The wire is going to give it to you every time. So they have physical, virtual, and cloud-based appliance solutions. What's best for you is really going to depend on how much throughput you have. The physical is going to give you the most amount that you can collect and analyze rapidly. The virtual's a little smaller scale, and the cloud is going to be something that you have to look at. If you have something in the cloud or you want to get something connected, check that out. One of the coolest things here is that they're actually one of very few vendors which are licensed to inspect the Citrix ICA and HDX protocols. And what that means is you can see the usage on the wire of user sessions and their different ICA channels, like client drive mapping or printing, or their ICA latency. So you could effectively raise an alarm when you have a session with ICA latency over a threshold and have that emailed to you. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, this can effectively replace some other things or supplement some stuff that you might already have in your environment. So check out Extra out, man. They actually give you a free Discovery Edition to run as a VM, so you can get accustomed to it. I recommend it.
Very cool.
Next up, I'm a hardware geek, so I kind of appreciated this one. Oh, my goodness, yeah, I had to walk away from you during this. You're talking with the vendor there. I can't.
I think to Adam, I might have been speaking in tongues. But I thought this HP Moonshot was a really cool platform. It's a really energy-efficient microserver chassis. It's going to reduce your footprint in the data center, both in a physical capacity and an energy-efficient capacity. To me, when I looked at it, I had one expectation, and after talking to the HP guy, I kind of understood where it is in the market. To me, it's kind of the missing link between a discrete physical server and one of the very large blade chassis. You can get this thing in your rack, taking up a couple of U, connected to your existing network and storage infrastructure, and I'm not sure the exact count of blades, but it's a lot more than some of the blade chassis I've come across. You can really get your money's worth out of these things. You can throw different microservers in there that are going to set them up good for anything from web hosting to VDI, task-based usage, or something that's graphically intensive. And the management interface, like some other HP products we're familiar with, is integrated and scales so that you can manage multiple nodes from a single point of access.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that they have different, what do they call them? They still call them blades?
Well, they call them microserver. Yeah.
But they had different microserver cards that you could get, and they were better suited for different types of workloads. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool because some of the microservers are running like the system on a chip, which is like a pre-configured processing environment that's going to run those workloads, more optimized than just a generic CPU that you're throwing some type of kernel at.
Right. So we've never deployed a Moonshot. However, a plug for the community. I know Carl Webster at Webster, the accidental Citrix admin online on .com. He, together with, I believe, Jari and Gibson, have a lot of experience. So anybody on the webinar, if you want to know more and get some real hardcore implementation feedback or some advice, you should reach out to Carl Webster or Jari and Gibson. In addition to that, I know Dane Young also has experience with Moonshot. He was a very early adopter. So some names there.
Okay, and the last member of the technology showcase we have here is a product by the name of Frame. And this is something new I've seen in the cloud-based application delivery environment. It might sound pretty familiar to some other things you're used to working with in your experience. As far as running any software in your browser from anywhere, it might sound familiar. However, with this particular product, you don't need to manage any of the access layer or brokering layers, or even the compute layer. You effectively sign up for a subscription. You're allocated, the resources that you're subscribing for, and you have direct access to install your applications, deliver them to groups that you decide to manage, so on and so forth. And it's even compatible with graphic-intensive apps. So you might want to check this out if you think you have a use case for something like that. And the website's actually not brain.com, it's fra.me for reference.
Interesting. I haven't seen that used much for vendors. That's amazing. Cool.
Okay, and we're going to get on to our tips and tricks section here. So, like we said, there was a very, very heavy focus on the GPU virtualization at our conference here. So I just wanted to give a quick rundown of the different types of GPU virtualization. You may already be familiar with them. The software 3D is effectively no GPU virtualization, and CPUs doing all of your rendering. The API intercept is going to be an agent or driver that runs in your guest and offloads the processing to the GPU. The benefit of that is that you're going to be able to live migrate between different types of hardware and just live migrate, period, because all of your processing is being offloaded from the guest to the GPU. Whereas with the last two, the PCI pass-through and the NVIDIA grid, you're basically connecting directly from the guest to the hardware. And you're going to be running native drivers in that guest to render the video. So you're really going to get the most performance, but you're also going to lose the capability to perform things like live migration. So it might be good for someone like someone doing very graphically intensive apps that doesn't necessarily need that fault tolerant aspect. The GPU virtualization, most vendors are compatible with any one of them. There's one hypervisor which I believe is locked into an API intercept. We won't name them by name, but you can do a little research and you can figure that out. As far as getting your best bang for the buck out of the hardware and the performance, you're going to have to look and see, am I going to map one GPU to one VM and then run setup on there and do a one-to-many user to GPU, or am I going to do a one-to-one VDI to GPU? It's going to depend on the use case and how much graphical acceleration you need. But one of the best things I came away with from one of the sessions is that even your users without 3D apps can benefit from the GPU acceleration, because you're just going to take that overhead off of your CPU, put it on the graphical processing unit, and you can really see some impressive improvement to your user density just by adding a GPU.
So, Kyle, that's pretty awesome. And I've been a fan of this space for a long time. And like you, avid PC gamer and NVIDIA fanboy. So it's awesome to see NVIDIA getting now into what I do professionally, and because I've been a fan of them personally for so long. One community named Thomas Poppelgaard, he's like the guru of this GPU acceleration. He's done a lot with remote PC and things of that nature. So anybody out there looking for more information, Thomas Poppelgaard's a great community resource. You can find him on Twitter at Poppelgaard.
Okay, next in line, we have the cloud access security brokers. Now, if this isn't something that you've heard of, it might be something that you want to keep on your radar, especially with all those cloud service providers that are popping up, ASPs and storage providers. They're all over the place. And whether or not you want your users to use them, they're probably going to. So take a look at these CASBs, cloud access security brokers. It's a security appliance, which is going to sit either in your trusted network or in the cloud, and it's going to proxy the connection from your trusted users or network into those cloud service providers. And you can actually configure them via policy to say what content can be stored, how it's going to be stored, who can store it, and who can access it. For example, you could write a policy that says, okay, everyone in my senior executive group is allowed to upload things to Dropbox, but I'm going to dynamically encrypt it with the key that's been issued to the appliance, so it's already stored encrypted once it's uploaded. And you can download it. It's going to reverse proxy back into your environment, dynamically decrypt it, and deliver it to your users. Now, one thing you might think of is, oh, hey, what if I'm outside and need to get to that really quickly? Well, there's a solution for that. You set up a URL for your company, and you could actually reverse proxy into your environment to proxy through the CASB to get to your provider safely and securely. And as we're discussing here, this is a way that you can manage and eliminate those users who are using it anyway, and eliminate those shadow IT issues that you have in your environment.
That's really cool, and I know when you got back from BriForum, you were really excited about this. And again, showing my age, and I'm a huge Clash fan, so know, I'm expecting you next year to do a presentation at BriForum, and what do you think you could call this?
Well, with the Clash reference, I think the only logical choice would be to rock the Casby.
All right, very cool.
So I have my work cut out for me until next year. Okay, and
this was fun.
Yeah, this was a cool session. And how many of us have ever had an issue where you can't fix your application, and the application team that you're dealing with says, "Oh, it's not our issue. It's something, it's something in Citrix or it's something on the guest." Well, if you can't necessarily figure out how to fix your application, try to break it. And you might already be doing something like this. If you're not, get a test bed set up. Because in the instance where you're going to need to do something like this, you might not want to spend the time to go ahead and set everything up. And it's not necessarily like a list of things we could tell you to step through. It's more of a mindset. So get your app loaded, check it out, and then just systematically break it. Okay, we know we're doing GPO customizations. What if we take away those GPOs or add them? Does something happen? No. Well, it's not the GPOs. Okay, move on to the next one. And only you're going to know your environment. So take a look at those areas you're customizing, whether it's registry, if it's logon, if it's user personalization, something like that. This might be a tactic that you can use to save some time and improve your life a little bit.
Yeah, I thought this was a really great talk, and it spoke to me in my software engineering background, because this is very much the kind of mindset you have to take, either if you are testing an application or attempting to identify a bug in an application where a user has reported, hey, if I do this and this and this, it blows up. And it's a great mindset, and as you said, Kyle, it's very effective to help narrow down and pinpoint the cause of an issue, especially if you take a systematic approach to it where you're making one change at a time and then retesting. Once it does give you the error message that you're trying to reproduce, you'll know exactly what did it.
Yeah, or even if you can't find the same error message, maybe you get something similar, and you just need to isolate and get some direction, and this is a tactic that you can use to do that.
Absolutely. This one was one of my favorites, personally. The Internet of Things. It's personally, at home, I'm a bit of a hobbyist when it comes to trying to automate my home, and I've got light switches and all kinds of things I can control from my home, whether I'm home or out. And so this talk was given by Joe Shonk. Joe Shonk's a great guy, and he brought in so many toys. He actually brought down one of the lamps from his hotel room to demonstrate one of those light bulbs that can display different colors. He needed a lamp to put the light bulb in. He got permission.
Oh.
He got permission from the hotel to bring it down.
But luckily, the conference was in the hotel.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so he just had to bring it down the stairs. And this was one of those great talks that kind of gets your mind going and really gets you thinking about the possibilities and what's out there. So, for anyone who's not familiar with the Internet of Things, it quite literally is the concept of creating an internet out of all of the things in your life. Having, your dog food bowl talk to the internet, having your light switches connected to the internet, anything you can imagine connected to the internet, sharing information and giving you access to either query things or control things. But then when you think about it, really, how do you use that in business? That's one of the reasons I thought this talk was very interesting. It was very thought-provoking on that. What Joe demonstrated is he used the Amazon Echo, which is the kind of a cylinder stand that does voice recognition through the keyword Alexa. So Joe put some custom code in with Alexa and was able to, through only using his voice, manage a virtual IP on a NetScaler. So he was adding a server to the VIP and checking which servers belong to the VIP, and you could remove a server from the VIP just by talking. Now, to some people, that's going to be a very scary concept because, well, there was no authentication there. All he had to do was say the words. But I think there's still a lot of potential for applications of technology like this, maybe not to manage a NetScaler, but to query the status, to get a report and see, hey, tell me, Alexa, tell me what's up, tell me what's down in my environment. Getting connected with the things on the internet is going to connect our server room to our mobile devices and our lives at home, perhaps, in ways that we've never experienced before. And it's going to make us more effective administrators, I think.
Excellent. I'm excited about it, too. You got me thinking about the dog food bowl.
I'm thinking about the NetScalers.
building and running a test lab. This was another really great talk given by Dr. Benny Trich.
He's a great speaker.
Yeah, Benny gives good presentations.
And this was a phenomenal concept that he covered. And again, this spoke to me in my software engineering roots, where he talked a lot about his experience working at CERN and how they had the scientific approach, scientific method, and how everything had this process that gave them reproducibility of their test results. And so Benny walked us through his test lab that he's built. So now he's got this lab, and he's also got, I think Sean Bass has the exact same lab, and so does Ruben. So they've all built the exact same lab, down to like the hardware identification numbers, basically. And this is so great. They have this organized, systematic approach. And what I thought was really great about this, it actually shed some light for me on some of these components that I wouldn't have even thought, like a frame grabber. Having a frame grabber as part of your lab, and using that to capture the videos that you use to play back your tests. This is so crucially important too, because like Benny said, you're going to find some things that don't look very good for a particular vendor, and that vendor is going to come after you. When that happens, you have to be able to back up your tests and prove out your results.
Very interesting. So Adam, I think it falls in line with our culture here as well. Always provide defensible data, avoid conjecture. We want to know why you feel a certain way. Avoid talking about technology with opinion. Right? Have defensible data that drives your solution requirements and design. So, excellent.
Very true.
Okay, and I know you're all going to love this last tip here. I especially did, and we've already used it a couple of times since we've returned from the conference. I don't know how many of you have ever had maybe some users in a different region or different geographic location who call up and tell you they disconnect and Citrix is the issue. Well, this tip right here might help you to defend yourself a little bit, dovetailing into Mark's comment there about defensible data and backing it up. So you can use this tip here to run a packet capture and plot your latency in a graph and really determine if there is a network issue coming into your environment or anywhere in your environment. It's really easy to do. Just enable the conversion calculation as you see in step 1, and then browse into the statistics menu and open up the IO graph. Change your y-axis units to the advanced field. You'll see a couple new fields appear. Then you can change your metric in the calc area based on what you want to see. You want to see the min, the max, or the average. I usually start with the average and then plot the min or the max in graph 2 or 3. Enter the tcp.time_delta string into the calculation field, and then click on the respective graph number button to plot it. And what you'll see there is you'll see the actual representation of the TCP time deltas and the time it took between packets, and you can really catch some network issues in the act there and help them to get diagnosed and fixed properly.
Kyle, I think you told me you recently used this, right?
Oh yeah, we had some users. I forget what city. They were over in India. I think it was like Hyderabad, something like that. And they were accessing resources in the European region. They were having some issues with some slow screen draws, text echo, mouse delay. We confirmed that they were all in the same policies with other users that weren't having any issues. All the screen optimizations were in place. So naturally, we turned to some network issue, and they were adamant they didn't have one. So we set up a trace on the NetScaler, let it run for a little while, pulled it off of there, filtered it just to their client IP, and then plotted their TCP time delta. And we saw things measurable in seconds, not milliseconds, in seconds. And it turns out that they had an issue with overheating, and their routers were failing in their data center. And we helped them to identify that.
Should explain the seconds.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's excellent. So do we have any questions out there? I'm really excited to hear.
We do have a couple of questions for you. The first question that we've got is, I wasn't able to attend BriForum this year. Are there any tips, anything you can give me that would help me convince my boss to send me to BriForum next year?
First, I would say show them this presentation so you can see all the cool stuff that you missed, and really just let them know that it's not a sales pitch. You're not going there to be sold a product or coerced into buying something. You're going to get real-world data and evidence from your peers, and find out how they're using it, what they're doing, what works, what doesn't, and you can bring that back and use that. That's what we're doing. So.
Yeah. And actually, Brian Madden and his team, they very actively almost police. I don't want to say police. That sounds a bit too strong, but they really keep an eye on the content that comes in and how everybody's behaving to keep that sales aspect really at bay. This is a technical conference for technical people, and you're going to learn a lot, no matter where you come from.
Yeah, so I didn't go this year, and I was very disappointed that I didn't make it. But my advice to anyone who's up against that employer-funded conference dilemma is you have to sell a little bit too. Like Kyle and Adam said, show what you're going to bring back from it. More importantly, commit to a trip report. These are things that may sway your employer. And also, don't pitch it as a conference. Explain to your employer that this is training. You're going there for training. And lastly, if you do go, my advice, sit up front and definitely talk to your peers. Go to these events. Don't be shy. Really get out there and engage with the community. Ask the presenters questions. The first thing I loved at my first BriForum was I was able to ask a guy like Sean Bass, someone who I've read his articles and almost was a fan of him, and he was just a regular guy, gave me some great tips, and then always remembered me. And every time I see him now, and he's done amazingly well for his career, but always remembers the face and the handshake. So that's my advice if you're under some pressure there and you can't fund it yourself and you needed your employer to fund it.
And we're rapidly running out of time, but I do have one more question for you guys. What did you see at BriForum that was a real surprise to you?
That's a good question.
I think for me, I was definitely surprised to see an actual Docker talk on the agenda. It was a pleasant surprise. That's not something I was expecting quite so soon. Doing the work that we do here, we can see that that's the direction we're heading in, and it's still very hard to gauge the timeline, how quickly we're going to get there. So again, a pleasant surprise. We're very quickly moving towards this DevOps sort of world.
I think, and playing on what Adam was saying, I was kind of surprised to see how much and how rapidly we are seeing that DevOps come to the forefront. I went expecting a lot of infrastructure and that type of perspective, and we got a lot more coding-oriented things as well, which is good.
And that made me happy.
Oh, we know.
That's what I love to see.
Well, hey, this has been a great session, and I hope those listening and watching felt like they were there with Kyle and Adam. I'm certainly disappointed that I missed the barcade experience with the arcade games and the great conversations that must have been had. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Great questions. Thank you, Kyle and Adam. And we'd like to wrap up our webinar here, and this will be available for download at a later date.